What's up everyone, and welcome to another Rust electrical tutorial. I'm Gneissish, and today's video is going to be for those of you who are brand new to Rust or Rust electrical, with the addition of the console edition, and the recent addition of electricity to the console version of this game. We've had a lot of new players, and I think it's time that we, make a video just for you folks. So welcome. And the goal here is just to kind of give you a tour of the components in Rust and kind of give you an idea of how you should be thinking when you're, designing and coming up with your different builds that you'd like to complete. So to begin, we're going to just look at the crafting. It's very, very simple. All the components for the Rust electrical can be crafted in the tier 1 or tier 2 workbench. You can find these components and BP them in the standard way, or you can use the tech tree, which is now I think a little more expensive, but still worth it if you're just trying to hunt down that particular item to craft. Now, I've broken this up into sections: root power, batteries, switches, and what I'm calling stuff over there. And I did that for a reason, and this is kind of the workflow of a sort of generic circuit, just so that you can kind of get the idea of how to start. So we're going to start with root power. Root power there are three primary power sources. It's the wind turbine, the generator, and the solar panel. Now, each of these things has different components to it that make it what it is. The generator has a maximum output of 40 volts, and so if you turn it on and you have a wiring tool equipped, you'll see it has 40 out. You can access by holding E, at least on PC, to open and add fuel to it. I have a video on generators, at least some uses of them in caves. You can check that out if you want to know more about that. The other very, very common root power source is the solar panel. They have a maximum output of 20. Now, they are either going to be placed north or south. I'll link that video as well. This is a recent update, so they've become a little more complicated, but you can check out my video on that if you're interested in those. And then finally, we have the wind turbine. The wind turbine has a maximum output of 150. You can see here, it's going to depend entirely on where you place it on the map. So in this case, I'm way out in the ocean just for this video, but depending on where you are, the closer to the coast, the higher it is, the more output it is, and then the higher you install it. So a properly installed wind turbine will on average put out close to 150ish, but they do vary over time. That is, of course, a topic for a later, more advanced video. So again, that's root power. This is kind of where you start. You have to have some sort of power source to power your batteries, and Rust uses the name root power. Now, on to the second part, batteries. This would be step 2. You have some sort of power source hooked up on your base, and now you have to attach that power source to a battery. Rust has 3 primary batteries, I guess just 3 batteries in general, and it has a small battery, a medium battery, and a large battery. They have different wattage amounts. So the small battery is a 10 watt, this is a 50 watt, and this is a 100 watt. They all, Rust batteries have this 80% charging efficiency, which just means that, say, for every volt, it only accepts 80% of that volt to charge, which means this is one of the first hurdles I think new players have with the electrical systems. You have this power source, and then you're setting it up to charge here, but how much do you need? The simplest way to do that is to just say that the charging requirement for any battery is going to be equal to the active usage of that battery divided by 0.80. So let's say we look at this, right there you can see active usage is 0 because there's nothing hooked to this battery. But if there was, you could divide that number by 0.80, round to the nearest whole number, and that's the minimum amount of power you need coming into that battery on average to keep it from losing charge. Now, what a lot of players do is they just make sure that the battery receives the amount of charge it would need if it had full active usage. So this one, if it's 10, divide that, you get 12.5. So you need at least 13 or more to keep the small battery going. This one's 50, and I think that's 62.5 if you divide that out. So I think that's going to be about 63 or more to keep this one going. And then the large battery is 100. 100 divided by 0.8 is 1.25. And so you'd need, or 125, you would need 125 or more supplied to this battery to keep it from dying if it was fully loaded. So, but if you want to just supply it based on what it's only powering, so therefore what the active usage number says there, you just put that number into here and you divide out, and that's what you need. So And that's it. So the batteries are relatively simple. You just have to keep them charged with your root power sources. So moving on to switches, this is, I think, where things get much more complicated. But once you kind of get the hang of it, you'll start to kind of understand, how you can link these together. So here we have some kind of power source. We have that hooked up to some kind of battery, and now we want to do something with that power that we have. So here we just have sort of a smattering of not everything, but the things you'll most commonly use in most of your builds. We have an AND switch, an OR switch, and an XOR switch. These are logic gates. I have a video on those if you want to check out more about how to use that kind of stuff. We have a switch, a smart switch. The only difference is the switch you turn on and off manually. You can use these inputs on the side. They are, at least as of this video, notoriously glitchy. Most of us don't quite use them yet. The smart switch is the same thing as the switch. Has an input and an output. You can turn it on and off. This is how you'd like run a wire out of your battery into that out to some kind of stuff over there, and you can turn it on and off. So this is probably the most common one, lights, things like that. The smart switch is the same thing, except that you can hook it up to Rust Plus, and you can turn this one on and off with your cell phone, or a variety of ways. So the button is this is an interesting part about this button that I think is useful for new players, is that it does supply its own volt when you press it. So if you press this, it'll send a volt out if it's hooked to something. So that's useful in that if you want to send a single reference volt to something, you can do so with no other power things hooked up to this. If you hook power into it, it will pass more voltage if that's the goal. These are the switches, the most common switches here. The root combiner is as it sounds. It is 4 root power sources like we have over here. So if you have say anything more than a single power source, so once you have 2 solar panels or more, you have 2 wind turbines or more, you have a few generators, any combination of these together, whatever you have, that's how you bring them into one single output, and what you use the root combiner for. The number one tip for that is however many of these root power sources you're trying to put into one, subtract that by 1, and that's how many root combiners you need. So if you have 5 solar panels, you're gonna need 4 root combiners, things like that. The branch switch here is a splitter, but it's an advanced splitter, and so you can set the branch out, which is this top left output here. So whatever you set this to is if it has that power coming in, it will push that out, the branch out, and the branch out takes priority. So if you have this set to 5, say, and you send 5 to it or 6 to it, it's gonna send it out the branch out first before it sends whatever's left out the power out. So you could think of it as the priority is the branch, and then whatever you have left, the garbage, however you want to think about it, that's what comes out of the power out. This is an incredibly useful switch. This is one of the most powerful things you'll use in this game when you're starting to make more complex things, or you want to manage the power you have, a little more refined. You're gonna use the branch switch. This is the blocker. It is also what it sounds like. It passes power from the power into the power out. If it receives a reference volt to this side input, it will block the output, and it'll stop the passage of power through it. So that's a very useful switch. This is the memory cell. You could think of this as the trap base switch, really. It could do a ton of things. It is most famously known for its use in the trap base circuit. I have a video on that you can check out if you want. This is the RAN switch. Almost no one uses this. I will produce a video on things you can do with this, so we're not really going to get into that right now, but just so you know that it's there. This is the splitter. It is much similar to the branch switch in that it is technically a splitter, but this is an even splitter. So whatever it sends in here, it's going to use a volt. I guess I should probably say that. All of these require a volt to run, so if you send 1 to this, you will have nothing coming out here. You have to account for the volt that any one of these things hooks up, with the exception of this. You need to count for a volt to power that. So this splitter, let's say you send 31 because it needs 1, so it'll split this 10, 10, and 10 if things are hooked up to it. So what it does is it evenly cuts the power it receives after using one for itself into however many items are hooked up to this. So if you hook up 2 items, it'll split it in half, 3, it'll split into thirds. So pretty simple. So they're both splitters, but this one is a much more powerful splitter in that you can define what the output is on one side and technically the output on the other if you know what's coming into it. So over here, we've got the HBHF sensor. This is a sensor that detects players. So you can set it to, exclude, authorize, that's for the tool cupboard, include, authorize, or any combination of the above. This gets kind of confusing, so this is something for another video, but just understand that that's how you can sense players. Some tips about it: it is noisy, and so they will hear it, so you have to get clever about how you use this. Other detector type switches in the game are the pressure plate here. And that just is the pressure pad, excuse me, is what it is you think it is. It receives power, and when someone steps on it, it passes power. And so you can use that for traps. Same thing with the laser here. It's got a power in, power out. It requires a volt just like anything else. And so if it detects a player in its path, it sends a volt out the other side. So minimum 2 to this if you want it to pass a volt. Same thing with this. And over here we have our wireless stuff over here. This is the RF broadcaster, and so this can be set to a particular frequency of your choosing. There are a ton of things you can do with this, but this just sends out a frequency. So if it's powered all the time, it just continually sends it out. You can have it set up to where it sends out a frequency upon some switch or some whatever you're using it for. I've used this in a multitude of things. You can check out those videos. This is the RF receiver. This is what receives whatever signal this is sending out. So if you send out a signal at set to frequency, in this case 1, this is probably also set to 1. This will receive that and pass power if it receives it. So you can imagine that there are, again, a ton of things that you could do with these. This is the smart switch. This is what pairs you to the Rust Plus app. So you can, if you set this up, the smart alarm, you can say what it is, you can have whatever the message is, and when this is powered, it will send a message to your Rust Plus app in real life, and so then you can do stuff with it. So that's switches, and then the final thing I have over here is stuff. And so I just called it stuff because after all this stuff over here of all these, the root power, batteries, and switches, the goal is, of course, to do something with it. And this is where you terminate, or your goal is to, here we have a fluid switch and pump. If you're doing farming or whatever, or you have sprinklers in the cold areas to, like for people who are armored. We've got, like the igniter, we've got lights, we've got, house lights, this disco ball if you have that DLC, the dance floor. Most popular, of course, is the turret. We have the spotlight. That's actually pretty popular. The vehicle, the modular car lift, if you're building vehicles. The point is, if you're trying to power stuff, the elevator, we have a door here with a door controller on it to open this door. Whatever it is you're trying to do, this is the route you would take. It can be as simple or as complicated as you want. You can check out, I have videos with wildly complicated circuits that are almost ridiculous, but it is fun, right? So whatever you're trying to do, this is the generic why you're getting started. You're going to start with a root power source. You're going to connect it to a battery. You're going to make sure that what you're giving the battery is enough based on the active usage that you're using, whatever that is. You're going to take that battery and you're going to run that out to something, maybe just as simple as a switch, maybe just this, and that to a string of lights over there, and you're done. Or you're going to do something much more complicated. Whatever your goal is, you would run those batteries into your switches, do some power manipulation, and have it either contact you or do whatever it's doing, or maybe power something like a lift or a turret or lights or some combination of all of this, landing lights. There's things on here I didn't even include. Just the idea that you can power things with whatever you're doing. So that is pretty much all I've got, folks. The idea here is for you to just kind of get a little tour of like what you can do and what you can see with this stuff. I'm going to continue these beginner videos and make some very, very, very simple circuits here in the future. So if there's something you'd like to see that I haven't covered in other videos, or you'd like an update or something specific, please just let me know in the comments, or you can get me on my Discord. See you later.